Welcome to Basketball U. If you're new to Basketball U, make sure you slam dunk that subscribe button. And just to make sure you don't miss a thing, make sure you tap that notification bell right after you hit that subscribe button. Hey! Welcome back to Basketball U. Now I know you were impressed with the history of basketball and everything involved in it being accomplished over time. But one thing that we wanted to do is give the women their separate history. And today, that's all we're going to talk about. I'll talk about how women's basketball turned from girls not even being able to dribble the ball to girls now going up with two hands, dunking the ball, and hanging on the rim. It's crazy how the evolution of the women's game has really increased not only over the last 30 years, but over just the last 10. Still trying to figure out whether or not they should make the girls' game high-flying, like the men's game, by lowering the rim or doing extra things to enhance the quality of gameplay they tend to continue to mess with. So we will try to give you a nice history of it and kind of give you an overview of what's going on with women's basketball right now and who are the top players and what they are doing. Now we all know basketball started back in 1891, but women's basketball started the year after the game of basketball was invented. The history of women's basketball have instant popularity. Now, just like anything else, there's going to be trial and error. So as we give you this timeline on what's going on with the game of women's basketball, you will see a little bit of failure, but only to rise as big as it is right now. So as we tell you the history about this game, we can take a little bit different approach with similar information, but a lot of different rules and different guidelines and changes, way crazier than the men's game. So, as you know, Dr. James Naismith invented the game of basketball at the Massachusetts YMCA school in 1891. His 13 original rules and description of the game was published in January 1892 and read by Cinda Barrison Abbott, physical education instructor at nearby Smith College. She immediately created new rules for women to discourage roughness and introduce basketball to the women in Smith College. Peach baskets and soccer balls were used, but she devised according to 3 equal sections and requires players to stay in their section. Stealing the ball is prohibited. Players may not hold the ball more than 3 seconds, and there is a 3 bounce limit on dribbles. Rules were very little strict back then, seeing how many times people dribbled the ball in both facets of the men and women's game today, but let's get back to it. Benderson's rules, often modified, spread rapidly across the country via YMCAs and colleges, but many women also used men's rules. Clara Gregory Bear, physical culture instructor at Sophie Newcomb College in New Orleans, publishes the first women's basketball rules book. From that time, the game of basketball, according to women's, was called basket. It was dropped in her first revision in 1908. A demonstration game was played in March 13, 1895, including an all-female audience of 560 at the Southern Athletic Club, the first publicly played basketball game in the South. Bear's rules was much different than Barrison's. Divide the court according to the number of players on the side, 11 sections of 11 players, 7 sections of 7 on a side, etc. No dribbling or guarding was allowed. Players given 6 seconds to aim and shoot the ball. No backboards were allowed. Players may only run when the ball is in the air, and then a few steps within the area. Goals are changed after each score, so that offense and defense roles were reversed. Uniquely, the one-handed push-out was required more than 40 years before the one-handed shot became popular in the men's game. A two-handed shot and a two-handed pass is a foul. These rules was too much. Bears' rules in her game were used widely across the South and managed to scatter places elsewhere until 1922. Now that you have come adapt to these official rules, we're going to move ahead a little bit further to 1901 to 1902, noting the different sets of rules. Luther Golick and other leaders at an 1899 physical training meeting in Springfield have decided for the women at the meeting to form a basketball committee to incorporate all modifications into one set of rules with the help of the players. The committee decided on Barrison's original rules, in which certain players play off 5 to 10 players on a side. This then became published in 1901 by Spalding Athletic Library, which then included Bear's rules and men's rules. Bear then said, "This is getting confusing already, and we haven't even really started playing the game all over the world, or let alone just the country." So in 1903 to 1904, time was shortened to 15 minutes instead of 20 minutes in the first revised rules by the committee. In 1905 to 1906, the National Women's Basketball Committee becomes part of the American Physical Education Association, known today as American Alliance for Health, Physical Education, Recreation, and Dance, known as AAHPERD, which is a huge compliment already and a big step for the women's game in such a short time. Dribbling was eliminated in 1910, only to return in the 1913-1914 season. Imagine the game of basketball with no dribbling. How much fun would it be to watch today? I was wondering. Sit and ponder on that for a moment. In 1916, there was no coaching from the sidelines during the game, but only at halftime you could regroup and coach your team with some type of strategy. Other than that, you were just watching it happen, whether it was a win or a loss. And I can only imagine with the skill development back then, those are some tough games to watch. So as time passed from 1917 to 1969, there was just so many different rules to the game that we could probably spend 45 minutes telling you about every detail. But in 1969 to 1970, the use of 5 players in a full court game in combination with a 30-second shot clock is permitted for the first time, and it continues for a second season. Now that the game is getting popular, and now that the girls are feeling more like the men's in a basketball game, running up and down the floor, being able to go both sides, we now fast forward to 1987, where the 3-point line is included in the game, sitting at 19 foot 9 inches from the center of the basket. This enhances a little bit more excitement for the girls' game, as long as the scores will continuously go higher now, being able to average more points with one shot. That was just a quick overlook of basically how difficult it was to not only modify the game for women, and not because they weren't able to do what the men were able to do. It was just about being more safe, because the women didn't wear the same things men wore. The shoes they wore back then were not even close to the shoes they are wearing today. Also, they were a bit skeptical of the skin being shown and men coming in to watch them play. Just a lot of different factors when it came to the development of the women's game. So many things were taken into consideration as far as safety. It was then until June of 1997, women's basketball evolved, and it finally had something to call their own. The WNBA, at the time consisting of 8 teams. The Los Angeles Sparks, the Sacramento Monarchs, Utah Stars, Phoenix Mercury, Houston Comets, Charlotte Sting, and New York Liberty. The love of the older generation helped pave the way for the younger generation of star players lighting up on the court now. Here are some names you might have seen or are familiar with, young and old. Lisa Leslie, Shamik Holtzclaw, Cynthia Cooper, Diana Taurasi, Maya Moore, and can't forget about the best dunker in the women's game ever, Brittany Griner. All these talented women have taken their game all over the world to continue to spread the love of the women's game. And with their amazing abilities, opportunities and endorsements, salaries, and more national exposure have increased, making it a professional sport for women that will be lucrative to their livelihood, where they can support their families. One quick fun fact, there have been 21 dunks that have been scored by 7 different WNBA players. 7 of them were scored in All-Star games, while the remaining 14 took place during the regular season or playoffs. The first and second were scored by Lisa Leslie of the Los Angeles Sparks on July 30th, 2002 against the Miami Soul, and July 9th, 2005. Pretty cool to think the game started with no dribbling, and now they are dunking it just like the super athletes of the NBA. Keep going strong, girls, and making the game more exciting every day. This is Basketball U. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And also, follow all of our social medias right there in the description to keep yourself up to date, as this channel will have a lot of basketball, a lot of players, and a lot of training and more information on how to play the game of basketball. Remember, someone's always working. Are you?